The floorboards of Whitaker's General Store groaned under Zoe Ali's boots. It was the sound of judgment. Her basket was mostly empty. Flour, salt, a small tin of lard. Not enough, but it was all she could hope for. Mr. Whitaker looked up from his ledger, and his face closed like a slammed door. "No more credit, Miss Ali," he said, not unkindly, but with the finality of a judge. "You're 3 months past due." Heat crawled up Zoe's neck. Humiliation. It was a physical thing, heavy and hot. She could feel the eyes of the other women in the store, 2 respectable wives, pretending to look at fabric bolts while they drank in her shame. "I understand," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she started putting the items back. The lard, the salt. She paused over the flour. Her father had to eat. She had to eat. But the coins in her pocket felt impossibly light. How much for just the flour? The voice was hers, but it sounded small. Pathetic. 35 cents. Zoe counted out her coins. 18 cents. That was it. That was all that stood between her and total failure. The washing she'd done for Mrs. Henderson hadn't been paid for yet. It might never be. "I'm 17 cents short," she said. The words tasted like ash. The bell on the door jingled. She didn't look up. She was too busy fighting back tears, trying to hold on to the last scrap of her dignity before she had to put the flour back and walk out with nothing. Her father would be hungry again tonight. Because of her. "How much is she short?" The voice was deep, male, unfamiliar. Zoe's head snapped up. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore a dusty hat and a look of concern that felt so out of place it was jarring. 17 cents, Mr. Whitaker answered. The stranger reached into his pocket. "Put her items on my account," he said, his voice calm and steady, "and add a pound of bacon and 2 pounds of beans." He placed the coins on the counter. The clink was deafening in the silence. "I can't," Zoe said, her pride flaring even as her stomach growled in betrayal. "I don't take charity." The man turned to her, and his eyes held something that wasn't pity. It was respect. "It's not charity," he said. "It's an offer of work. I'm Jake Turner. I work at the Diamondback Ranch." The Diamondback, the biggest spread in the county, a place she'd only heard whispers about. "The owner's hosting a dinner for the hands tonight," he continued. "There's always more food than we can eat. You help serve, and you can take home whatever's left. I'll fill your table, Miss Ali. All it will cost you is a few hours of your time." It was too good to be true. Men didn't help women for nothing. There was always a price. But her father hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. His body was broken from the mine collapse, and his spirit wasn't far behind. They were drowning, and this man was offering a lifeline. But lifelines can quickly turn into nooses. "Why me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Why are you choosing me?" A flicker of something crossed his face, an emotion she couldn't read. "I've seen you around town," he said, "working yourself to the bone, keeping your head high when folks look right through you. That takes strength." He paused. "And everyone deserves a helping hand now and then." No one had said anything kind to her in years. No one had seen her in years. She was just the poor Ali girl, a burden and a ghost. "One dinner," she heard herself say. "I'll help serve. Then I take the leftovers and go home. That's all." A smile transformed his face, making him look younger, less imposing. "That's all I'm asking." He took the packages from a now bustling Mr. Whitaker. "My wagon's outside." "I have to take these home first," she said, clutching the food like a treasure. "Tell my father." "Of course," Jake said easily. "I'll drive you." As they left the store, the whispers started behind them. Zoe Ali, riding off with a stranger. Let them talk. Gossip couldn't hurt her anymore. The cabin was a shack, barely standing. Jake didn't flinch. He just waited. Inside, her father's eyes were wide with worry. "You sure about this, girl?" Patrick asked, his gaze shifting from Zoe to the man outside. "No," she admitted. "But we need the food." "Take the kitchen knife," he ordered. "Keep it in your boot. If anything feels wrong, You run." She did as he said, the cold steel against her ankle a small, grim comfort. The ride out of town was surprisingly normal. Jake talked about horses, about the ranch owners, the Davidsons. He spoke of his own modest dreams. He was easy to listen to, and slowly Zoe felt the tight knot in her stomach loosen just a fraction. Then they crested a hill, and she saw it. The Diamondback Ranch. It wasn't a ranch, it was a kingdom. It was a massive two-story house with glass windows glowing in the dusk, fences that stretched for miles. It was another world, and she was an intruder. "I don't belong here," she whispered, looking down at her faded dress. Jake came around and helped her down from the wagon, his hands warm and steady. "Yes, you do," he said firmly. "Tonight, you absolutely do." As her feet touched the ground, she knew she'd crossed a line. There was no going back. The inside of the house smelled like heaven: roast beef, fresh bread, apple pie. The dining table was set for 20, with crystal glasses that sparkled in the lamplight. A handsome woman with silver in her hair greeted them. "You must be Miss Allie," she said warmly. "I'm Martha Davidson. Jake told us you might join us. Welcome." Her husband, a big man with a booming laugh, shook Zoe's hand. "Any friend of Jake's is welcome here." It was all so normal, so kind. It put her even more on edge. She was seated next to Jake. Food was passed in platters piled high. She took small portions, but Jake quietly urged her to take more. As the meal went on, she learned he was more than just a hand. He managed the entire horse breeding program. He was intelligent, respected. Then Mrs. Davidson glanced at her. "We're hoping to start a school here on the ranch for the children. Do you have any experience with teaching, Miss Allie?" Zoe's heart clenched. "I always dreamed of being a teacher." "I saw you once," Jake said softly beside her, "teaching the town children to read under the oak tree. You were born to do it." He'd seen her months ago. The pieces weren't fitting together. Mr. Davidson leaned forward, his expression serious. "We also need someone for the stable records. Light work, bookkeeping. Your father was a mine clerk before the accident, wasn't he?" Ice flowed through Zoe's veins. This wasn't a coincidence. This was an ambush. "How do you know about my father?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Jake met her gaze. There was no apology in his eyes. "I asked around town," he admitted. "I wanted to help. I thought there might be work here for both of you." "Why?" she demanded, the words sharp as a shard of glass. "What do you want?" A flash of hurt crossed his face. "Nothing," he said. "Just a chance, an honest opportunity." Mrs. Davidson reached out and touched her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "My dear, the offers are real. We need the help. We can offer you a cottage right here on the property. Fair wages, a new start. A home, a job for her father. Her dream of teaching. Everything she had ever wanted, laid out before her like a trap. It was too perfect. And perfect things were always lies." The ride back to town was silent. Jake didn't push. He left her at her cabin with a basket of food so heavy she could barely carry it, and a simple, "Whatever you decide, the offer stands." She walked inside, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. This cowboy hadn't just offered her a meal. He had offered her a whole new life. And Zoe knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that a life offered so freely always came with a hidden cost. She just had to figure out what it was before she paid the price. Patrick Alley stared at the basket of food as if it were a miracle. Roast beef, bread, a whole apple pie. He tore into a piece of bread with a hunger that made Zoe's heart ache. "Tell me again," he said, his mouth full. "What does this man want?" "He says he wants nothing," Zoe answered. "He's offering us jobs, Papa. Both of us. A cottage to live in. A real wage." Her father chewed slowly, his eyes on some distant point. He'd been a broken man for 2 years, ever since the mine took his leg and his will to live. But now, a flicker of the old Patrick was there. "I've made a lot of mistakes, girl," he said. his voice rough. "But I'm not so far gone I can't see an opportunity. Don't let your pride make you stupid, Zoe. If the work is honest and the man seems decent, we take it. Pride is a cold meal when you're starving." His words hit her with the force of truth. 3 days later, she gave the Davidsons their answer. By the end of the month, they were living in a small cottage on the Diamondback Ranch. It had a roof that didn't leak and windows with real glass. To Zoe, it was a palace. The change in her father was astounding. Having a purpose again, keeping the stable ledgers, straightened his back and cleared the fog from his eyes. He stopped drinking. He started smiling. He was coming back to life. Zoe prepared for the school that would open in the spring, devouring the books Mrs. Davidson gave her. She was determined to be worthy of this chance. Jake kept his distance at first. A polite tip of the hat in the yard, a friendly nod. It was Mrs. Davidson who drew them together, inviting Zoe to dinners at the main house. The conversations were easy. The family was kind. Too kind. One evening, Zoe was walking back to her cottage when Jake fell into step beside her. "Mind if I walk with you?" They walked to the creek that cut through the property. He told her about growing up an orphan, about his love for horses, about drifting for years before finding the Davidsons. "I always just wanted to belong somewhere," he said, skipping a stone across the water. She found herself opening up too, telling him about her mother, about the hard years, about the dreams she'd packed away like old clothes. The more they talked, the more the walls around her heart began to crumble. He started showing up more often, helping her with chores, bringing her books. Their Sunday walks became a ritual. And somewhere along the way, the air between them began to crackle with an unspoken energy. Then, he announced he had to leave. A 3-week trip to Santa Fe to deliver horses. The news landed like a punch to the gut, revealing feelings she hadn't wanted to admit even to herself. The night before he left, they stood by the creek as the sun went down. "I'll miss you," he said, his voice low. "I'll miss you too," she whispered. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to touch her cheek. "May I kiss you, Zoe?" She could only nod. The kiss was soft, questioning, a promise of something more. When he pulled back, his eyes were full of an intensity that stole her breath. "I'll be back," he promised. But as she watched him ride away the next morning, a cold dread settled over her. Everything still felt too easy, too good. There was a piece of the puzzle missing, and she had a terrible feeling that his trip to Santa Fe was part of it. The letters started arriving a week later. His handwriting was neat, his words open and honest. He wrote about the trail, about the stars, about how he thought of her constantly. He wrote about their walks, their conversations, their kiss. "I should have told you weeks ago how I feel," he wrote. "Write to me. I need to know you're real and not something I dreamed up." Zoe wrote back, pouring her heart onto the page in a way she never could in person. With each letter they exchanged, a startling truth bloomed inside her. She was in love with Jake Turner. Completely. Irrevocably. In his second letter, there was a small package, a delicate pearl hairpin. "You deserve beautiful things," the note said. She wore it every day. When he returned 3 weeks later, she was in the stables with her father. She heard his voice, and her heart leaped. He was dusty and tired, but his face lit up when he saw her. "I got your letters," he said, his voice soft. "I read them until the paper started to wear thin." A week later was the ranch Christmas party. The main house was filled with music and laughter. Her father was there, joking with the other hands. He belonged. She belonged. Late in the evening, Jake pulled her into Mr. Davidson's quiet study. He handed her a book of poetry. Inside, he had written, "To Zoe, whose spirit contains more poetry than these pages ever could. Yours always, Jake." "Zoe," he began, the words tumbling out. "I've thought of nothing but you. I'm in love with you. I think I have been since the day I saw you in town." Her old fears rose up. "I have nothing to offer," she whispered. "No money, no family." "You have everything," he cut in, taking her hands. "Your strength, your kindness, your heart. That's all I want." The last of her walls crumbled. "I love you too," she said. The words both terrifying and liberating. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Say it again. I love you." And in the quiet of the study, surrounded by the warmth of the celebration, Zoe finally let herself believe. But the missing piece of the puzzle was still out there, and it was about to fall into place. A month later, Jake took her to a piece of land overlooking a valley. 50 acres of rolling hills and cottonwood trees. "This is ours," he said quietly, "if you'll have me." He explained he'd been saving for years. Mr. Davidson had agreed to sell him this parcel. He wanted to build a home here. With her. Then he was on one knee, his eyes fixed on her face. "Marry me, Zoe. Be my wife. Build this life with me." Tears streamed down her face as she said yes. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around under the vast winter sky. It was perfect. A perfect man. A perfect life. A perfect dream. That night, feeling bold and secure in his love, she finally asked the question that had been nagging her for months. They were sitting by the fire in her cottage. "That first night," she began, "at the dinner. Mr. Davidson knew my father had been a mine clerk. How? It's not something people in town talk about." Jake shifted in his seat. He didn't meet her eyes. "I told you, Zoe. I asked around." "Who did you ask?" She pressed gently. "Mr. Whitaker. The women in the store. They wouldn't know that. That was years ago, before the accident, back when we still had something." He was quiet for a long moment. He stared into the fire, his jaw tight. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," she said. "It felt like you knew everything about me, and I knew nothing about you. It felt calculated." Jake stood up and began to pace. "Calculated? I was trying to help." "But how did you know the perfect way to help? A job for my father that used his old skills? A job for me that was my secret dream? It's too much of a coincidence, Jake." He stopped pacing and finally looked at her. The warmth was gone from his eyes. In its place was a weary resignation. "It wasn't a coincidence," he said, his voice flat. And with those 4 words, Zoe's perfect dream began to shatter. "My name isn't Turner," he said, his voice low. "It's Davidson, Jake Davidson. Martha and William are my parents." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. She stared at him, the friendly ranch hand, the man she loved, and saw a complete stranger. The Davidsons weren't his employers. They were his parents. This whole time, she had been living in the home of the man who was courting her, and she hadn't known. "You lied to me," she whispered. The words felt like stones in her throat. Everything was a lie. "No," he said quickly, stepping toward her. "Not everything. My feelings for you, those are real. But the rest, yes. It was a setup. A test. A test." The word was colder than the winter wind outside. She had been an experiment. A project. "Why?" she asked, her voice shaking with a rage that was quickly replacing her shock. He ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with a pain that she now saw as selfish. "My older brother, Daniel. He was supposed to inherit this ranch. 5 years ago, he fell in love with a woman from town. Her family had fallen on hard times. Daniel wanted to save her. He paid off her father's debts, set them up with a new business. He was going to marry her." He paused, his eyes dark with memory. The day before the wedding, she disappeared. Her and her entire family. They took every cent Daniel had given them and vanished. It broke him. He left the territory, and we haven't heard from him since. He said he could never trust anyone again. The story was tragic, but it didn't excuse him. "So you decided to what? Rerun the experiment? Find another poor girl and see if she was worthy of your family's trust?" "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "At first, maybe. I saw you in town, so proud and so beaten down. I was cynical. I wanted to see what you would do. I arranged the scene at the store. I told Whitaker to refuse your credit that day. I wanted to see if you'd beg, or steal, or something else. He had orchestrated her deepest humiliation. The thought was nauseating. "But then you looked me in the eye and refused my charity," he said, his voice filled with a strange wonder. "You demanded to work for it. No one had ever done that. And when I brought you here, and you met my parents, you weren't fawning or trying to impress us. You were just you, cautious, proud, dignified. The test was supposed to be for a night," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But then I started talking to you. I started falling in love with you. The test became my own personal hell. I wanted to tell you 100 times, but I was a coward. I was afraid you'd walk away. And I couldn't bear that." She stood up, her body trembling. "So you kept lying. You let me fall in love with a man who didn't exist. A poor, honest ranch hand named Jake Turner." "He does exist," he said desperately. "That's who I am. The money, the ranch, that's my father's. All I have is what I've saved. The 50 acres, that's real. My dream of building a home with you, that's real." "Is it?" she shot back, her voice dripping with scorn. "Or is it just another part of the test? See if the poor girl will settle for a small piece of land when she finds out she could have had the whole kingdom?" The hurt in his eyes was deep, but she didn't care. He had earned it. "I have to go," she said, moving toward the door. "Zoe, please," he begged, blocking her path. "Don't leave. We can fix this." "Fix it?" she laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You can't fix this. Trust, once it's broken, doesn't just get glued back together. You didn't just lie to me, Jake. You played God with my life, with my father's life. You manipulated our desperation for your own cynical game." She pushed past him and ran out into the freezing night, the pretty pearl hairpin falling from her hair and landing unseen in the snow. She ran without knowing where she was going, tears freezing on her cheeks. The life she thought she had was a sham. The man she loved was a liar. She was just another poor girl, a pawn in a rich man's game. And she had been a fool to ever believe she could be anything more. She ended up at the stables. The smell of horses and hay was familiar, comforting. Her father was there, making his final rounds. He saw her face and his own grew grim. "What did he do?" Patrick asked, his voice low and dangerous. Between sobs, she told him everything. The lie, the name, the test, the brother. When she was finished, her father was silent for a long time. She expected him to be furious, to demand they leave at once. Instead, he put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The man's a fool for the way he went about it," Patrick said slowly. "A coward, too. But the question ain't whether he lied, Zoe. The question is why." "He was testing me," she cried, "to see if I was a gold digger like the other one." "No," her father said, his gaze steady. "I don't think he was testing you. I think he was testing himself, trying to see if a man with a broken heart could learn to trust again. He didn't test your price, girl. He tested your character. And from the sounds of it, you passed with flying colors." She stared at him, stunned. "You're defending him?" "I'm looking at the facts," he said calmly. "Are you hungry? Is there a roof over your head? Am I a broken drunk or a man with a purpose again? He did a bad thing, Zoe, but he did it with a good heart. Your mother always said a person's intentions matter more than their actions." She thought about the past few months. The kindness, the respect, the easy laughter, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. Were all of those things a lie? Or were they the truth, tangled up in a terrible deception? The stable door creaked open. It was Jake. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He didn't look at Zoe. He looked at her father. "Mr. Ali," he said, his voice hoarse, "I came to apologize to you. I used your hardship, and your daughter's, for my own selfish reasons. There's no excuse for it. Whatever Zoe decides, your job here is secure. For life. That was never part of the game." Then he turned to Zoe, his eyes pleading. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for your forgiveness. Not for Jake Turner, the ranch hand, but for Jake Davidson, The fool who fell in love with you and was too scared to tell you the truth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pearl hairpin. It glittered in the lantern light. You dropped this. He held it out to her. It was a choice. Take the pin and accept the fragile, complicated truth. Or leave it and walk away from the best thing that had ever happened to her, even if it was built on a lie. Her hand trembled as she reached out. Zoe took the hairpin. Her fingers brushed his, and a jolt went through them both. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But I don't want to leave. Relief washed over Jake's face, so profound it was heartbreaking. That's all I need, he said. Just a chance. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back your trust. I swear it. It wasn't easy. The next few weeks were strained. The easy comfort between them was gone, replaced by a cautious dance of rebuilding. She moved out of the cottage and into a room in the main house, a decision that felt both like a surrender and a step forward. Mrs. Davidson, Martha, came to her, her eyes full of shame. I am so sorry, Zoe, she said. We were wrong to go along with it. We were just so worried about Jake after what happened with Daniel. We saw him closing himself off from the world, and we got scared. We never should have used you to fix him. Her apology was genuine, and it helped. Slowly, Zoe began to see the situation from their side. A family terrified of being hurt again, trying to protect their son in a clumsy, misguided way. The real healing began on the land. Their land. Jake would work on it from sunup to sundown, clearing brush, planning the foundation for their house. She would join him after her teaching was done for the day. They didn't talk much at first. They just worked, side by side, finding a new rhythm in the shared labor. One afternoon, he stopped working and turned to her. I'm selling my prize stallion, he said. She was shocked. But that horse is your entire future. His bloodline is what your breeding business is built on. I don't need it, he said. I'm using the money to set up a trust for the town. For families like yours was. It'll offer no-interest loans, help with apprenticeships, a real safety net. It's what I should have done in the first place, instead of playing games. He was trying to atone, not with words, but with action. That night, she came to his room. She didn't say a word, just took his hand and led him back to hers. The trust they rebuilt wasn't the blind, innocent trust she'd had before. It was stronger, forged in fire, tempered by truth. They were married in May, on their land, under a simple flower arbor. Her father, sober and proud, walked her down the aisle. The Davidsons stood beside their son, their faces filled with a quiet, grateful joy. On their wedding night, Jake gave her a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a ring or a necklace, it was a locket. When she opened it, there was no picture. Instead, polished to a bright shine and sealed under a tiny piece of glass, were 17 cents. The best investment I ever made, he whispered, his eyes full of a love that was, finally, completely real. 2 years later, Zoe stood on the porch of their finished home. Their home. She held their infant daughter, Eileen, in her arms. Her father sat in a rocking chair, carving a wooden horse for his granddaughter. Jake rode in from the pastures, tired but smiling. He swung down from his horse and bounded up the steps, kissing her deeply before taking his daughter into his arms. Life was not a fairy tale. It was hard, and it was complicated. Love wasn't a simple, perfect thing. It was messy and sometimes painful. But it was real. She had once been a girl who thought she had nothing. A girl who was 17 cents short. But standing here with her family on their land, under a wide Montana sky, she knew the truth. She had been rich all along. She just needed someone to show her where her true treasures were. What do you think is the most important part of a second chance? The forgiveness you get, or the forgiveness you give? If you enjoyed this story of a love that was tested and rebuilt, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the heart.